Okay, well, thank you all for joining me for the deed funding workshop. Just try to make this as fast and sweet as possible. And if you have any questions, by all means, please drop them in the comments and I will answer those questions as we walk through. It's best if you ask your questions once those questions come to your mind. So you, number one, you don't forget them. And number two, we can speak to it directly while that window is open. So as always, I always ask everyone to please turn off any distractions, myself included, because I do get distracted. Um, and I just want to make sure that everyone can get all of the information um, without distraction, if you will. All right, so I fixed my devices. Hopefully you fixed your own. Okay, let's get this party started. So during the deed funding process, what we're going to learn in this particular agenda, we are going to talk about what deed funding is, what it's not, how deed funding actually works, who deed funding is for and not for, because obviously deed funding is not for everyone. I'm going to also show you how to submit the funding requests in the process. And at the end, if you all want to stay around at the end of it, I will go into another segment where I will talk about if you're wanting to become a deed fund agent, how you can get paid doing so. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Carlton Hoskins. I'm a deed fund specialist. I work with an organization called MDLQ. I'm actually one of the founders of that organization. Myself, I've been in real estate for a little over 25 years. I've dealt with tax deeds, tax liens, commercial real estate, both triple net, non-triple net, managed commercial property, did a fix and flip, done pre-foreclosure. So I've been around a little bit doing real estate. My family grew up doing real estate in New Jersey, so I kind of had that background there. My background in real estate with my hands-on was in Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Now, I like everyone to drop in the chat. What do you do in real estate? How long have you been in real estate? Even if you're just getting started, are you a loan broker? Are you an investor? Are you a wholesaler? I just really want to get a feel of who I'm talking to. Some of you may be new to Google Meets in this aspect. So just so you know, the chat button is on the bottom right of your screen, and it should look like a little message box. So feel free to go ahead and drop that in there, and I will take a look at what you have. So if you want to take a second, you can go ahead and do that. And I'll continue so we don't slow down the pace. I know some of you are interested in getting to lunch. So let's see here. Here. Getting started with rentals. Okay, awesome, good. This will be perfect for you. This will be perfect. And that's also another big deal for me. I want to make sure that the people that are learning this information is relevant to them. I don't want to sell someone a pipe dream and they don't understand how this actually works for them. So by all means, let's just keep the messages going. Again, if you have questions or anything, feel free to drop that. Great. Masha's been doing a little under a year, started in overages, foreclosures, and funding. Awesome. That's super awesome. 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 Cool. Thank you for sharing that information. Okay. Let's go into, let's talk everything about Creative Bridge funding in 4 lessons. So I'm going to make this a quick presentation. You'll learn everything that I have to share with you in the next 4 lessons. So grab a notepad, write down your notes, and let's just get this party started. Now, before I move on, I want to make certain everyone understands why we call this funding and not a loan. And before I go into that, I want to kind of give you a little background on what is deed funding. So when I think of deed funding, I always like to think of deed funding like a title max. You know, you drive your car, you go to the location, you give them your title, they give you funding. You drive away, they charge you an interest on that money. You pay that interest or that payment monthly or however you pay it. When you bring back all of the money that you owe them, they in turn give you back your title, right? So that's 100% collateral-based loan. The difference with deed funding is it's not a loan. It is truly funding. So they are going to take possession of the title of the property, whether it's a mobile home, whether it's a tax deed, whether it's commercial land or residential real estate, they will take possession of the title and then they will fund the deal. And we'll get into the details of how that funding works. But for now, they take title of the property, you get the funding, you do your deal, you come back, you may sell your property, you may flip your property, you may turn it into a rental or whatever you want to do. You pay back the funding, you get back the title to your loan. They are not interested in taking possession of the property, kind of like banks, right? Banks don't want to be REOs. They don't want to have bank-owned property. That inventory kills them. So in this case, same way, the funder is not interested in taking possession of the property. That's just the collateral. And so throughout this conversation over the next hour, or maybe shorter, we're going to talk about this from a perspective of funder and fundee. Funder being the person who's providing the funds, fundee is the person who's getting the funds. So you won't hear us say things like loans or loan to value and anything representing loan, because what I don't want to do is confuse anyone on what that actually is. So before I get any further down this rabbit hole, does anyone have any questions or need any more clarity on the difference between deed funding and deed loan? So you can drop in the chat. I'm happy if you want to take yourself off mute, ask a question. I'm fine with that. I do want this workshop to be interactive and not just me speaking to a group of people. So by all means, please, at any time, pop your hand up, take yourself off mute, interrupt me, and ask a question. All right, awesome. We'll just keep it moving then. So purchasing property currently owned and those that are not owned. So how does deed funding work? We're going to talk about that. Now, I'm going to look over here at my other screen, so don't mind me. In fact, I'll take myself off camera just for a second so you all aren't distracted by that. So how does deed funding work when you're purchasing property and currently owned property? When you're purchasing a property, the way that it works is that the funder, you being the fundee, you're buying the property, the funder comes in and they will purchase the property in their name, okay? They purchase the property in their name. Now, you get to pick the title company in which you want the property to be closed at, because you're going to pick the closing where, and hopefully you get to pick the when, right? The title company is so busy right now, it's kind of tight, but if you can get that pinpointed, number one, you want to pick a title company close to the property. So if they have to send out appraisers or anyone to look at the property, it's close. If they're 100 miles away, it's going to cost you a boatload to get someone to come down to that property, take a look at the property, right? So you want to make sure that when you're buying a property, you pick a title company that's close to the property. If you can, by all means, if you can, you're picking the title company, it's your choice. They purchase the property in their name. Now, when they purchase a property in their name, in a purchase, they will structure the taxes and they will pay for the taxes on the property. They will also set up property insurance for the property, okay? So you have to worry about that component. They're going to buy the property, they're going to get the insurance, they're going to get the taxes. This all falls into the terms and agreements in which you're getting the funding from. At the end of the term, when you come back and you buy your property back, kind of like Title Max, you're going to buy the property back because they're going to hand you a lease option at the purchase. So the moment they purchase, they're going to hand you a lease option according to the term that says you have the right to buy this property back in this period of time. Here is the interest rate. You will pay monthly interest rates, or you'll defer the interest rates. We'll talk about that in a bit. But you'll buy that property back. When you buy the property back, the taxes and the insurance will be reimbursed, so it will be included in the repurchase price. And I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. If not, drop a question, drop a comment. For currently owned properties, it's a little bit different. Currently owned properties, it doesn't require them to go get insurance or property taxes because you already have that covered. So on currently owned properties, they will go out, they will take the title, they will do an evaluation of the property. It's always going to be based off of the as-is value of the property, not the after repair value, not any of those things. They're going to look at what is the as-is value for the property. And let's talk about that for a second and why. Think about this. If you're acquiring a property or you own a property and the property is dilapidated, say the property could be worth $200,000, but the property's current value sits at $100,000. Their collateral is worth $100,000. It's not worth $200,000 until it gets improved. So they can't use the future value of the property because there's no guarantee that the future value will be achieved. So when you're thinking about that, they're looking at the collateral as is on currently owned property. Now, I'll say this a few times. When you're purchasing a property, you're not able to defer the monthly payments on that. You can defer the closing costs. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But on currently owned properties, you can defer the monthly payments, meaning you can get into a property or you can get funding for a property with just simply an application fee, which doesn't happen until you review the terms and sign off at $40. Okay, so when we're doing these transactions, proof of funds aren't needed at all. And that's why I have that written on the bottom of the screen so that everyone is aware that proof of funds are not relevant. And I'll tell you why they're not relevant in this case. Because the funder is going to buy the property, whether they're buying the owned property from you or they're going to buy the new property that you want. In either case, they're going to buy the property outright and then they're going to provide you with the lease option. So if there's an existing debt on the property, they're going to pay that off. They're not going to fund a percentage of it and take a second position because they're going to take title to the property. So the property title is in the name of the funder, and of course, the lease option for the term agreement is provided back. The funds are not paid back by the end of the term. They're going to try to reach out to you and make sure that, hey, let's get this satisfied so that you can keep your property. If you decide at that moment, you know what, forget it, I don't want it, I'm not going to pay it back, I don't have the funds, whatever the reasons are, then they'll move on. They own the property. There's no reason for them to foreclose because they own the property. The only thing that would happen is that the lease option will have expired. Okay. Let's keep this thing moving. So let's talk about some of the rates and how much is actually borrowed in this process. And I use the word borrow very loosely, okay, because this is really a funding deal. So let's talk about currently owned. So currently owned assets, these are traditional real estate. Again, this could be commercial, residential, or land. In fact, doing a deal right now that's land that's being sold by one owner and a mobile manufactured home being sold by another owner, and putting both properties together to get funding. So you can do some very unique things with this. So don't let imagination slow you down. The monthly payments, when you're going into the funding, I want you to think about the as-is value always. If it's a currently owned property, they will fund up to 70% of the as-is value. So if the property is currently owned by you and you want to get funding, the property is worth $100,000, they'll fund you 70% of that. They'll give you $70,000. In this case, there's no exceeding debts, there's no mortgages on it, everything is paid off. If that was true, then you would just get $70,000. You can take those funds, you can go on vacation, you can repair the property, you can go buy tax liens, tax deeds, you can buy more real estate, you can invest in a business, you can do whatever you want, right? Because the collateral is securing the funds. The way the rates of interest are going to work are going to be based off the term. If the term, and we call them a repurchase right, because remember, it's a lease option to buy it back. If you're saying, okay, I'm going to buy it back within 6 months, then the rate of that is 1%. So property worth 100,000, you have 70,000 that you have received in funding. 1% of 70,000 is going to be $700. The monthly payments would be $700 a month to just pay the interest on it. Principal payments are not included, and it's not amortized because it's not a loan. At the end of the term, you would go back and say, here's your $70,000 and take back possession of your property. Okay. During that period, you're still making the monthly payments of the interest only. Okay. Or the funding fee only, if you will. All right. So 0 to 6 is 1%. Any questions, please drop it in the message or in the chat and we'll talk about it. 7 to 12 months is 1.3%. So the rates change because it's a longer term. If you do 13 to 18 months, it's 1.5%. Okay. Question has always arrived. Okay, so what if I say I want to do 12 months and I return the funds in 6 months? Well, the rate is set based on the actual term. So if you say you want to use it for 12 months and you get funding for 12 months at 1.3% and you pay it off in 1 month, you would have still have only paid 1.3% for the month because it's charged monthly. There's no prepayment penalty fees, so there's no need to worry about that component. You can pay off and repurchase this property as early as you like, and there's no prepayment penalty to that because it's a repurchase of the property. Okay, what I want to make sure that we understand is that if you say 12 months, it's not that you will pay 1% for the first 6 months and then 1.3% 1.3% for the remaining months. It doesn't stagger. It's once you pick the term, that's the rate for the entire period. So if you pick 12 months, you're going to pay 1.3% every month for 12 months. Okay. Now, you see at the bottom, there's an option here to finance closing expenses. And you can absolutely do that. Some do not want to come to the table with closing costs. Closing costs can range anywhere from $500 to $2,000. You may not want to bring that money to the table. You may need that money for repairs or something else. That is okay. You can do that. If that is done, it's called deferring the closing cost. That closing cost would simply, deferring the closing cost would increase the monthly payment rate by 0.1%. So on a 6-month term, it would be 1.1%. 7.12, 7 to 12 be 1.4, 13 to 18 would be 1.6. I hope that's very clear. Now, you can always defer the closing cost on any of the transactions, okay, whether it's a purchase or it's currently owned, okay? So that option is always available. Keep in mind, the cost of closing is still going to appear at the end of the term. So if the closing cost was $1,000, the repurchase amount is going to include that $1,000. Right now, you're just paying the 0.1% as an interest to cover the closing cost. So it's not like you're paying the closing costs over the period of time. It is a rate of interest attached to the closing cost. So I hope that makes some sense. Again, at any time you have a question or comment, please let me know, and I'll be happy to pause and answer those. All right, let's move on to deferred. Everyone loves its component in this part of the workshop where I talk about currently owned and deferred. So if you own the property, you can defer the monthly payments. What does that mean? Same thing I meant when I was talking about the closing costs. You can come to this deal with a $40 application fee and not make a monthly payment on the funded amount until the end of the term. Okay, I'm gonna make that very clear. You can take the funding, get into your deal, and not make a monthly payment till the end. What does that mean to you? That means whatever the monthly payments would have been, they're being accumulated. They're being accumulated, and they're added to the end of the loan, and added to the end of the funding period. Let me clarify. Added to the end of the funding period. And I see why he's got a question right here, and that's a great question. Does currently owned mean free and cleared, as in there's no mortgage? No, that's not what currently owned means. Great question, Wahid. Currently owned means it's your property, meaning you're not going to go buy a new property. You currently own it. Whether you have a mortgage or 2 mortgages or 3 mortgages or a tax deed, you own it. You own it. You may have some liens against it, but those liens will get wiped out. They will get paid off. So it does not have to be free and cleared in the process. There are a lot of individuals who do rental properties, kind of like yourself, Wahid, who are doing Airbnb or whatever, and they have 2 or 3 properties that they're financing. They want to restructure those finances. That is considered currently owned, not a purchase. So you can definitely use currently owned in that space. So I hope that answered your question. If that wasn't, please just let me know and I'll be happy to share more. So when they're doing deferred on currently owned, remember it can only be done on currently owned when we talk about the monthly payments, the funding amount changes of the as-is value. Previously, if it was on the owned, it would be 70%. On deferred owned, it's going to be 50%. So if the property is worth $100,000, and you were looking to, and currently owned, you would be able to get 70% of that, which would be 70,000. If you're deferring the funding, the monthly payments, then you would be able to get $50,000. Okay, so it just changes the amount of funding amount on the as-is value. So it lowers that just a little bit. Okay, the monthly payments are structured, of course, to increase to accommodate that particular structure, that particular funding style. So 0 to 6 months, as you can see here, is going to be 1.5. So it's increased by 0.5 due to the complexity of this structure. Again, remember, this is 100% collateral. They do not check credit. They do not pull a credit score. The care about your credit score, and they don't care about the income. So none of those are requirements, and there's no 2-1 or 2T or 2-3 T3 requirements of experience in order to get involved in this type of structure. However, your rates are going to change when it's deferred. 1.5 for 0 to 6 months, 1.8 for 7 to 12 months. Again, the monthly payments are not being paid monthly. So this 1.5% is being calculated and is going to appear on the repurchase amount at the end of the term. So at the end of the term is when you're going to pay all of the interest that would have accumulated and back the principal at the beginning of the deal. So throughout this entire period, there's no funds out of pocket. And this is a really interesting structure because, and I'm not going to say it's prevalent or it's all over the market, but it's not impossible to find property at 30, 40 cents on the dollar. It's not impossible. I'm not saying they're everywhere, but they're not impossible. And if you can find deals like that, where you can get into them and own that property, get the ownership of the property, and then do currently owned deferred, you get 50%, you would be 20% to the good or 10% in positive funding that could help you remodel, repair, or leverage. I love the leveraging option. Again, on these, you can offset the closing cost by deferring them as well. Again, it would just add the 0.1%. So if you deferred closing and you deferred the monthly payments, again, it could only happen in currently owned properties. 1.6 and 1.9 would be the rates for those. Okay. Any questions? All right. Thank you all for staying with me. Hope this is making some sense. All right, let's move into the purchasing of properties. This is where this is the wholesaler's dream here. This is where you can acquire a property. If you were a wholesaler and you were flipping properties, the reason you were probably flipping properties is because you don't have the funds to actually buy the asset. So you're getting the paper on the contract, and then you're raising the value of the contract, and then you're assigning it to someone else. And then you're going to make the spread, typically between $5,000 and $10,000. Well, now wholesalers have this option of in the purchasing, and it's not just for wholesalers, it's for anyone who wants to do this, as long as it's not their primary residence. Okay. And that applies to currently owned. It cannot be the primary residence. Okay. So you cannot do deferments on the monthly payments. I think I mentioned that earlier on a purchase. However, this does apply to all traditional real estate, and that includes commercial, land, and residential. The monthly payments on this are in the as-is value, the funding amount of the as-is value, 60%. So if you're purchasing the property has an as-is value of $100,000, you'll be able to get $60,000 toward that purchase. Okay, as long as this property is not going to be your primary residence. The payments on those, very similar to the original owned. It's 1% from 0 to 6, 1.3 to 7 to 12, 1.5 to 13 to 18. And again, you can defer the closing, but you cannot defer the monthly payments on a purchase. And that's pretty straightforward. Okay. The only thing that does not apply inside of the purchasing is purchasing a tax deed or going to auction. It has to be traditional real estate, meaning someone is selling and you're buying. Okay. It could be a mobile home. It could be land. It could be a mobile home land combination. It could be multi-units. It could be whatever that is, commercial, land, and residential. It all applies. Okay. I want to move on and start talking about some of the fees, because this is one of the things that we often hear. The fundee will pay the fundee, and this is the one who was looking for the funds, again, will pay the following upon signing a term sheet agreement, and the application fee is $40. And I want to talk about this just for a little bit for clarity. The process in doing this, there's a form that's going to be completed by the fundee. They're going to request it, whether it's for their client, whether it's for themselves, they're going to request it. We will look over these documents, and we will send it over to underwriting. Underwriting will look at the documents, and they will put together an official term sheet. It's not formal. It doesn't mean that you have to close the deal, but it's an official term sheet restating all of the information you've placed on it. Okay. before any of appraisals, before any of that. They're going to go off of your word on basically what the price of the property is, what you're asking for. Does it fit? Is it 60%, 70%, 50%? Do the terms make sense? Does what you're asking make sense? If it does, really simple. And I think I'm breaking it down in a way so that there's no complications as to understanding how it's going to flow. Hard pause right there. We got a question from Wahid. For currently owned, is this considered a sale for purpose of capital gains taxes? Wahid, I'm going to presume that you mean the sale in the transfer to into the funder. I'm going to presume that's what you're referring to. So if it's currently owned and the funder is funding the property, okay, great. And the funder is funding the property, they're actually buying the property. The way that I would look at that on the currently owned is the sale value or the sale price is going to be whatever that percentage is, for example. So let's say the property's worth $200,000 currently owned. You're not going to defer. So you can do 70%, right? $200,000 home, 70% is going to be $140,000. So if the value of the property at the initial acquisition or initial purchase of the property wasn't over 140, then the capital gains is going to be zero because the value of the property wasn't sold for more than what it was previously bought for. But if it is for more than what it was bought for, there can be an instance of capital gains. And in that sense, yeah, there would be some capital gains. But if it isn't, and if we're doing this right, it shouldn't appear that way because we don't have to say we're selling it for $200,000. We're really just selling it to match the collateral versus the assets, if that makes sense. You're welcome, Wahid. Great question. Good question there. Okay. So the application fee. Again, once you get the term sheet, you look over it and you say, yes, this is what I want. These are the terms. I understand this. This is the property. Everything looks right. Dot my I's, cross my T's. Yes. Then you sign that DocuSign, send it back to the lender, and they're going to actually for the application cost. You submit the application cost in the form, whether it's by ACH or a debit card or however you choose to pay for that. It goes directly to them. It does not go to us. They receive that and they begin the process of getting the deal closed. And typically they can do those deals within as fast as 3 weeks. Just keep in mind if there's a question of 3 weeks, meaning, yeah, it's not really 3 weeks, it's like 2 weeks and a day, I would forego trying to go to the funding because there's a lot of steps that need to happen on their side. And 3 weeks is as fast as, not the fast. That is not their longest period, but it is their shortest period. So keep that in mind as you're structuring the deals, that 3 weeks is going to be right around when they can get the deal closed. And again, you'll be picking your own title companies for the deal. Pick the title company closest to the property and it makes life a lot faster. Just one to go on. In the transactions, during the process of closing, the fundee is going to pay, and these are the costs that I refer to being deferred, if you will. If you choose to defer the closing costs, this is what all would be calculated under the deferred closing cost. So there's the recording cost with the state, city, the county, let me clarify, all the funder closing expenses, transfer taxes, the document preparations. You all can see this on the screen. I don't think it makes sense for me to read off the screen. I want to talk about the collateral review fee of $500 per assets because it is written this way inside of the term sheet, but I want to explain it for clarity because by no means is this private investor looking to gouge people and take their money. By no means. He wouldn't be where he is today if he did that. But on the agreement, it reads, if the collateral does not meet the collateral profile as stated above, this agreement is canceled and borrower agrees to pay the collateral review. Well, I spoke with him directly and there's a clarification to this. If the collateral does not meet the collateral profile as stated, the funder will adjust the numbers accordingly to what the true value is. And this is what I mean. If a property is submitted and the fundee is saying, oh, the property is worth $100,000, just for an example, and they check and they find out that the property true value is $70,000, they're going to let you know, hey, look, we did our research and it came back, the property is actually, the true value of that property is $70,000. They're going to let you know, and they're willing to restructure the deal to fit the $70,000. At that point, if the fundee decides, you know what, no, I don't want it, I just forget it. That's when the $500 fee would be assessed. Okay, not just because the numbers are incorrect. It's not a math test. They're not going to say, oh, you had the wrong number, we're out. And just to give you some an example of a true story, there was a young lady who was actually doing a funding deal, and I think she was looking at the ARV in her mind, and the property had a value of $1.1 million. But right now, today, the property as is value was $559. So she's looking for funding based off of $1 million. Well, of course, the funder is looking at that property saying this property is nowhere near $1 million. Where did they get this number? Now, they didn't kick back the agreement. They just said, where did they get this number? I want to get a better understanding. And when we reached out, she said, oh, because I'm going to improve the property. I'm going to put in a pool. It's in the specific cul-de-sac. The property values are going, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, fair enough. But we can't fund it using $1 million as its value. We need to correct that to 559 and then work from there. If you want to continue, great. If not, then the deal could be canceled, but the $500 fee would still be assessed in this case because they would have deployed their resources in order to get to this point, which is a lot of work on the backside, as you can possibly imagine. Okay, so I hope that's clear. If there's any questions, please let me know. There's also 4 points for origination. That is standard for most hard money. You might get some less or more, but this is one of those non-negotiable points. It's just part of it. At 1% monthly, as low as 1% monthly, this just makes all the sense in the world. And any other transactional related costs. Remember, all of this can be deferred at closing, meaning you can walk right into this deal with $40 application fee once you reviewed and signed the term sheet. Okay. All right. Who is deed funds not for? Consumers. And what do I mean when I say consumers? I mean, this cannot be used for your primary residence as collateral. So if I'm an investor and I have 4 or 5 properties out there, I own all of those properties. Those are not my primary residence. I'm not filing on my taxes as this is my primary residence. I don't have, tax exemption on the property, homestead exemptions on my property because it's not my primary residence. However, if I decided, well, I want to use my primary residence as collateral in order to invest into more real estate, I wouldn't be able to do that because it's my primary residence. Okay, so I hope that's really clear. If it's the primary residence, we cannot do the funding deal on a primary residence. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that's clear. Awesome. Who is the deeds funds for, though? Who do I think it's right for? Number one, I think wholesalers will bask in this. Investors like Wahid, who does rental properties. Beautiful. That's a great way to bridge into a property. And I'm going to speak to that just for a little bit, since I've already talked to the wholesaler side. From an investor perspective, if I'm going into a rental, whether it's multi-units or single family, for whatever I'm going to do, I can acquire this property 50% or 60%, right? Because I'm not deferring, so I can get 60% of the purchase price. If the property's 60% of the as-is value, let me clarify, not of the purchase price, of the as-is value. So if the property has an as-is value of $100,000, but the homeowner is selling it for $40,000, and I can get 60% of the as-is value, I can get $60,000. $40,000 pays for the property. There's still $20,000 there. I can fix it up, make it pretty, market it, and put it out there as a rental, right? I can start generating revenue from that in a bridge perspective. It hasn't hit my credit, so it hasn't increased my DTI. It doesn't rely on my income, so it doesn't matter how fast I get it into the market to start generating revenue. But it buys me time in order to get the asset, and then I can go seek alternative funding or traditional funding and say, hey, I have an asset that I own and I want to collateralize it in order to do long-term financing, 20-year financing, 25-year financing, 30-year financing, or someone specific to that type of financing. So it's a great avenue. It's a creative bridge to get into deals that you otherwise couldn't get into for a long period of time. And of course, mortgage brokers love it as an alternative. Here, I typically go deep into the wholesalers, but I think we already understand that wholesalers flipping papers, they can now stop flipping the paper and actually acquire the asset. By doing so, they're going to make even more money doing that type of deal. So I just have a quick questions for everybody while we're all sitting here. Would you use deed funds? That's my question. Does this make sense to you? Is this something that you would use? Please drop your comments in the messaging. Awesome. Okay. Let's discuss applications. Okay. In the application process, and I think I've kind of walked through it a few times, I just want to make sure that I got it clear. What we're going to do is review the property as is value, and we're going to use tools like Zillow, PropStream, or others just to get a quick sense. If you're submitting your deal, I suggest you do the same. Just pull a number. Sometimes you go to Zillow and the numbers are all over the place. I get it. We're not looking for an MLS number. We're not looking for an appraiser to come out before you submit the deal. It's just making sure that, again, the property value, the as-is value makes sense. Okay. The funder is going to review the application. The term sheet is going to get sent to the fundee for the review and signature. You'll sign that, send it back for $40. The funder begins the due diligence process. Then the fundee is going to select the title company, and you're going to close within about 3 weeks. Okay. If you're an agent, things are going to be a little bit more detailed, but if you're just doing this deal for yourself, this is how the process is going to work. And again, if you're interested in learning more about becoming an agent, stick around to the end, and I will have that conversation on how you can make commissions doing the very same thing and sharing this with other people. What I didn't see is anyone chatting. I'm not selling from the 40% gap. That is correct. That is correct, Rahid. If and that's a really good point. Not sure if you could use it. Since the properties are not selling for under value, if it only provides 60% of the funding, there's a 40% gap. That is correct. One of the things that it adds value to is the amount of the gap that you have to cover, right? 60%, many places will provide 70%, 80%. They're going to rely on credit. They're going to rely on income in order to make the determination of funding. When you're dealing with deed funds, it's 100% collateral. Now, when investors are typically looking at acquiring properties for whatever reasons that they're acquiring them, they're never going to go to the market into a retail perspective. We're not going to walk into the market even now today as I'm looking at properties. I'm never going to walk into a property who is saying the property's worth $100,000, but the homeowner is selling it for $105,000, and there's 10 bids at $115,000, right? That's where the market is today. It's super hot. Prices and properties are going up every day. Every second that you wait, the value of the property increases, right? When an investor is looking at properties, we're looking at those properties where homeowners are looking to get off of the properties. What many people do not realize is that there's about 1.3 million foreclosures happening this year. That's a huge inventory that banks don't want. That's 1.3 million properties going into auction just this year alone. Okay, and this is in the wake of COVID. So from a funding perspective, if I was looking for properties, I'm looking for properties that I can get for less than 60 cents on the dollar. Are they prevalent? Are they everywhere? No. You have to seek them out. We have to find out who's under pre-foreclosures, who's going into foreclosure. And we have to change our mantra talking to the homeowners in a pre-foreclosure perspective, because those are the assets that we want to acquire. We don't want to acquire retail property and then turn it into another investment. We want to acquire property for pennies on the dollar. This is where investors make their bread and butter. We need to get properties for less than 70 cents on the dollar. Most investors would say 70 cents on the dollar minus repairs. which means they're talking 53, 54, 55 cents on the dollar. Not unheard of. I actually have a deal on my desk right now where the property's worth $76,000, but the amount of debt owed on the property is $19,000. Perfect deal. So they're not impossible to find, especially if we're using the wholesalers as our leg. The wholesalers are the army in the street that is getting all these deals, which is why we see all over Facebook, people are talking about, hey, I'm looking for buyers. I'm looking for a buyer's list. I need buyers. You're a cash buyer. Send me your email, because they're running across a boatload of deals. Once we start communicating, or once you start communicating with wholesalers that you have funding and you're able to close these deals, there may be ways to partner with them. Be very creative with that, and let them find the deals for you and bring the deals to you, and you just check off yes or no if they make sense to you. And if it's something that is for rental, or if it's something that I want to flip, or something that I want to give to my mom for her birthday, whatever it is, whatever the reasonings are, I want to think about going into those deals far less than 60 cents on the dollar, at least 55 cents on the dollar, because there needs to be some wiggle room for closing costs and all of the other fees. And I'd love to get into a property that doesn't cost me out of pocket. I don't think I've ever acquired a home to where I put money down at closing. I'm typically getting paid 3 days later after closing with a check, because I don't go into deals on the retail side. And there are deals that can be done. There may not be what we want, but there are deals out there that make a lot of sense, even in the rental space. So I hope that's helpful information and it could be utilized. But I do understand the concern if there's only 60% and the properties are going for their true value. Yeah, it is impossible. It wouldn't fit in that model of buying retail properties and using deed funding. It would be more for a more aggressive investor who's looking to get properties for pennies on the dollar and knowing how to utilize the wholesalers to make that happen that way. All right. So let's keep this going. And if there's any questions, absolutely. You're very welcome, Wahid. I'm glad to be helpful here. That's why I'm here. So, hey, we have an open floor. Raise your hand. Let me know if you have any questions. We talked about the taxes and the insurance. Anything that may come to mind, and you're free to take yourself off mute and just talk to me. I'm not a robot. I'm here. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. Let me know what you may have, thoughts, concerns, considerations. Okay, I don't see any hands jumping up, and I don't see anyone coming off mute, and nothing's in my box. So I'm going to keep it moving. All right. So with that said, listen, if you're interested in using deed funding, by all means, please reach out to me. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Wahid, to your point, I can give you a million examples. I'm happy to help you with some deal structuring, helping you to utilize deed funds in the best way. Anyone else on the calls, I'm free to have that conversation. There's not a charge to talk to me. The reason I'm here and my partner Tehran Glover's here is that we're trying to get these funds out to people so that they can make more intelligent deals and make more money in the real estate world. So if there's questions, my number's on the screen, my email's on the screen. Eventually we will have up a website that you can go to. This is just getting started, and we funded quite a bit of deals from the funder side. So that's what we're here for. If you want to stick around and learn more about how to become a funding agent and actually make money doing that, sharing funds with other wholesalers, other investors, other mortgage brokers, just stick around for a bit. If there's any questions here, I'm going to give everyone just a moment to go through those. And then I'm going to run through the whole funding agent component really quick. So if you want to stick around, please do. If not, have a great day. Thank you for joining us. Okay. For those of you who have stuck around, thank you for joining me. We're going to start talking about how you can make money while you continue doing what you do, right? Continue doing what you do. Do you. And you can make money as a funding agent. So We call our funding agents marketing coordinators. And to become a marketing coordinator, it happens in 4 really easy steps. Number 1, you complete the agreement to become a funder. Number 2, you get the application form. The application form is a form that we will send over to you, or our agency division will send over to you. This will be the form that you utilize in order to receive applications from clients who are interested in funding their deals. Number 3, promote deed funds, right? That's probably number 1. You complete the agreement, then you promote, and then you get your application. But you're going to promote it. The way that we are promoting, it's really easy. It's not a hard, direct messaging component. It is, we simply go onto Facebook groups and other groups and other social platforms where people are asking about funding. And they're saying, hey, I'm looking for funding. I can show you a really quick example, but I won't pause the where we're going. But you can really quickly go into different funding groups, hard money lending groups on Facebook. Look in there, you see people asking for money. Is there any hard money lenders who can help me in this particular deal? And simply drop in a message that says, hey, I'd be happy to help you. Let me see if we can help. Tell them a little bit about it and drop your business card or drop a link, or they can DM you, get on the phone call and have the conversation. That's it. They go through the process, you get paid. That's how it works. I would typically go through a commission structure, but we're making some changes to think the way things are going to flow, and that may be a lot better. So I don't even want to show that particular screen. So I'm going to just fly right past it. But as an agent, you have an option, or a marketing coordinator, you have an option to either refer the deal or close the deal. If you refer the deal, then you get a certain percentage. If you actually manage the deal, meaning review the application for accuracy, submit the application into MDLQ so that we can review it and send it over to the underwriters. Of course, the funder is going to send the term sheets back to the fundee. When they do that, there may be some communication that needs to happen with the fundee to make sure that all their questions are answered in the term sheet. Kind of like some of the things I went over in the term sheet earlier in this workshop. Those are mainly the big questions about the insurance and the taxes and where the fees fall, et cetera. And then the funder provides the update to MDLQ, and we provide that out to the agents and the marketing coordinators so they know where the status of the application is. Once that's done and the closing happens, 24 hours after closing, you get paid. So it's really simple process of going out and just sharing the information with others of how this process works and how deed funding works. So if this is something that you're interested in, please reach out to me. Reach out to me directly. Again, I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen. You can reach out to me, and one of our agent directors will talk with you, answer any of your questions, and get you set up if that is something that you are interested in. And with that, I've actually completed everything in this workshop for you. Is there any questions, whether in the agency or marketing coordinator side or just in the funding deal, that you'd like to bring to my attention? Something you'd like some answers with? No? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I appreciate you for joining us on the deed funding workshop, and I look forward to hearing from you all. Have a great day.